be canning Yukon Gold potatoes. We've got 2 boxes, altogether 50 pounds. And this is our setup. I use the computer chair so I can put it at the correct height for me, so I don't end up with a bunch of back pain while I'm peeling at the table. And then I also have a little footstool to put my feet on so that my knees are not bothered as much while I am sitting here. Okay, table set up. I have a peeler, cutting board, and then a cleaver. You can use a knife, but because of my hand and wrist problems, it's easier to use a cleaver because I can hold it at one end with one hand and this end with the other hand and come straight down through the potato, and it doesn't put a lot of pressure on the part of my hand that hurts easily. So that's one of my workarounds. And then I also have an ergonomic potato peeler so that it doesn't put pressure on this part of my hand as well, and it makes things go a lot easier. And I have a wet washcloth in case I need to be wiping my hands off. I have my big pot to put the potatoes in, and then this pot, or these 2 bowls. This one is for potato peelings, and then my mom's station over here. She's shorter than me by a good 4 inches, so she works on the TV tray, and she peels into her bucket down there on the floor, but then she'll put her big potatoes up here until she has enough, and then she'll cut them up on her cutting board with the peeler she prefers and her cleaver. So that's how we set up. Most of the canning recipes I have seen call for you to either do whole potatoes or cut them into 1-inch cubes. And the whole potatoes are like when they're small, you know, about that size or smaller. But I actually don't like to do the 1-inch cubes because that makes the potatoes only pretty much good for mashing potatoes. And I find they're very mushy in the jar. And I like to have the option of making fried potatoes. So when I cut mine up, I do them in about 2-inch. See how easy that goes through? I do them in about 2-inch pieces, and then they hold together much better in the canning process than the 1-inch pieces. And then they're easily cut up for fried potatoes later, or I can still use them for mashed potatoes, or if I just want to serve them like boiled potatoes. They hold up really well, and they're not just a half pile of mush like the 1-inch potatoes can sometimes be. Alright, I've got my pots potatoes on to boil. You want to bring these to a boil for only 2 minutes. If you're cooking whole potatoes, you would bring it to a boil for 10 minutes, but with cut potatoes, 2 minutes is the amount of time you want to use. 10 minutes would just make it mushy when you can it. So since I'm using very large stock pots for my potatoes, instead of filling these with water at the sink, I use a couple of pitchers to bring the water to the stove. So this is a good thing to do when you have back problems or wrist problems like I do. And then I've also got my pot of regular water boiling, because once this has come to a boil, we'll be pouring the water it boiled in off to get rid of all of that potato starch. because if you use the same water that's in with your potatoes, you will have a very cloudy jar and lots of starch in there, and you don't want that. So you need the fresh water. Alright, so now I've called up the big guns to lift the pot off of the stove and dump it in the colander for me. And we just give these a quick little rinse with hot water to get the starch off. And then this will go back right back into the other pan. Watch your toes because you don't want to drip on them. Alright, well, I'm using my Tatler Easy lids to can these, and I have my rings here and my bulk lids here. And our big All-American canner will hold 14 quarts, so I need to get these out and ready. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And of course you can use the metal lids if you want to. To put these together, you just put this over like that. And then it goes into the pan to be scalded. Now these will not lift out with a magnet because they're not metal. So what I use is an ordinary pair of tongs. And sometimes I've seen that people use a pickle grabber as well, but I find the tongs to be easier. Okay, now I just need to fill this with water and put it on the stove and get the water to scalding. Alright, my potatoes are ready, my lids have been scalded, and the things that you will need besides your potatoes and your lids, you'll need a jar lifter. If you're using metal lids, you'll need a magnet. If you're using Tatler lids, you'll need tongs. You'll need a ladle, a canning funnel, and you'll need something to debubble with. I can't find my debubbler, so I'm just using the end of a spatula. And then of course your hot jars that have been sterilized. Alright, so take your ladle and ladle your potato chunks into your jar. When I get to this end, I kind of pick and choose the pieces that'll fit. Okay, you want to add a teaspoon of salt to your potatoes. You don't have to if you're watching your salt, or you could half it or something if you want to, but it really does make it taste better. Okay, now you add your boiling water, your fresh boiling water. You want an inch of headspace. You want to debubble. Get these air bubbles up to the surface, because if you don't, you could have water seepage out of your jars while you're pressure canning, and you can also have seal failure. So after all that work, you don't want that. Alright, sometimes releasing all the air bubbles will lower your water level if there were a lot. So you might have to add water at this point if it takes you down below an inch of headspace. And you want to take a wet washcloth and go around your rim. Make sure there's no food particles on it. Some people use vinegar. I only use vinegar if I am doing something that has fat or oil, like meat or broth, and that will dissolve that. Water takes off everything else, but some people will use vinegar all the time. You can make that choice for yourself. Okay, so lifting the lid out with my tongs. Make sure that your seal is on here. Sometimes it does come loose when you're scalding it. Okay, tighten it up. Now you do not need to back off on these easy tattlers. Backing off was something you had to do with the original tattlers, but these ones you just tighten it the same as you would a metal ring. But when you take these out of the canner, you will be tightening the rings again at that point. And you do need to take them out fairly soon after pressures come down, not leave them in for a couple hours like you might do with metal lids. And this goes over into your canner. Like so. My mother wanted me to be sure that I said the salt you need is pickling and canning salt and not regular salt, because you don't want any iodine in your salt that you put in with your canning. So this is what you need. Okay. Okay, so I got the I've got the one canner started. This one is a weight and gauge canner, and potatoes actually have to go at 11 pounds of pressure. I use the 10-pound gauge, but I have it up a little hotter than that, and it stays between the 10 and 15. So now I'm just need to wait for this to vent, and then we'll set a timer. Okay, oh, it's really hard to see, but this is now venting in the solid stream, so now we set a timer for 10 minutes. Now this smaller canner is just a gauge canner, and it has this floppy thing that you put up, and when this starts to vent and it's vented for the 10 minutes, then you plop that down, and then your gauge will start to rise. And this one you just kind of have to babysit and be there. Alright, I forgot to say this, but you want to put 3 quarts of water in your canner for potatoes. Our timer is on off, so I'm going to put on the 10-pound weight. But like I said, I run this a little high, so it stays between the 10 and 15 instead. It's just by having a higher temperature. It's just something that I learned how to do with this canner. Most people, or most books would recommend running it at 15 pounds of pressure, but I just find that that mushes the potatoes too much. So, you know, you follow the advice in the book and do it at 15 pounds of pressure if you want to. That's what they recommend. But it is supposed to be 11 pounds of pressure. And this is 40 minutes for quarts. If you were doing pints, it would be 35 minutes. Alright, we're now at 11 pounds of pressure. So we start our timer for 40 minutes. And this is just starting to vent, but no steady stream yet. Okay, this one's venting steadily now. So we can put the timer for 10 minutes on it. Okay, this is vented for its time, so then you just take and knock the little thingy down, and it'll build up to 10 pounds of pressure, and then when it, 11 pounds of pressure, and then when it does, you adjust the heat to keep it there, and set your timer for 40 minutes. And you definitely want to use a pot holder, otherwise you'll get a steam burn. Okay, this is up to right pressure, so I'm going to start the timer on this one. I'm getting a little high towards the 15, so I have to come down here and adjust the heat to bring the pressure down. It doesn't automatically do it like with weight. Alright, the timer's gone off for the big canner, so we just turn the heat off. And wait for it to come all the way down to the 0 before we take the weight off and the lid off. One other thing that I should mention is you want to scrub your cutting boards after doing a bunch of potatoes on them with soap immediately after you're done. You don't want to just put them in the dishwasher. If you don't scrub them down, they will stain brown if you just put them in the dishwasher. So that's the stuff you gotta do if you don't want to have brown cutting boards. But you can rescue that later by rubbing a cut onion all over it and then washing it. It's done, so just gotta turn the heat off and wait for that one to come down to temp. This one is almost there, probably another couple minutes and it will be, and I can take the lid off. Alright, the pressure has fallen completely to 0. Now the weight is still hot, so you're going to want to take that off with a pot holder. And hopefully I can get these undone because I had my son tighten them. Now with the All-American canner, you want to do it diagonally. Always opposite one across from itself. And because it's still pretty warm or hot, there's going to be steam in here. Even the handle's still hot. So we're going to want to lift this away from our bodies. and let the steam out away like that. And there we go. And I just need to get these out of here. Okay, sometimes if you have an old jar, that can happen. You'll get a broken jar and lose what's in here, and you'll have to throw away all of the contents of the jar because you can't risk having broken glass in your food. Okay guys, I lost another jar because I did something that I shouldn't have done. And when I was tightening these lids up afterwards, sometimes they're not down yet. And one was still bulging up like that one there. And I accidentally pressed down on it while I was tightening. And that jar, the lid exploded off. It hit the ceiling and it went in a 360-degree spray of the kitchen. And it's taken about 40 minutes to get the kitchen cleaned back up. And I got out of the way of most of it, but I did get burned on my arm and my face. And this was user error though. Thankfully, it's like a sunburn. It is not like a blister burn. So, with a lot of aloe and vitamin E oil, I think I'm going to be just fine. But I did want to pass along, don't press down on the bulge while you're tightening the jar, because it will go off like a rocket. Anyway, so now I have 18 jars when I started with 20, and then I've still got 2 full pots to can. Alright, so there's my successful jars. I've got 29 there. There's one in the fridge that didn't seal, and actually I'm not 100% sure that this one is going to seal completely, but I'll check it in the morning. And then there was the one that broke in the counter and the one that blew up on the ceiling. So, and I've still probably had another 7 quarts worth, but I was done canning for today.